In a single day, nearly 500 workers were detained during a sweeping immigration operation at Hyundai's sprawling Georgia plant, marking one of the largest workplace raids in recent U.S. history. But here's where it gets controversial. The majority of those arrested were South Korean nationals, raising urgent questions about how multinational corporations, subcontractors, and immigration enforcement intersect in the modern workforce. And this is the part most people miss. The chaos wasn't just about arrests. It was a clash of legal obligations, corporate responsibility, and the human stories of workers caught in the crossfire. The raid unfolded in Elabel, Georgia, a small town about 25 miles west of Savannah. Federal agents, including ICE and Homeland Security investigations, stormed the Hyundai Megaplant, home to an electric vehicle and battery manufacturing facility, on Thursday. Of the 475 people taken into custody, most were Korean nationals, though officials like Stephen Schrank, a Homeland Security Investigations special agent, confirmed they couldn't yet confirm exact nationalities. Schrank explained that the detainees were suspected of violating U.S. immigration laws. Some had entered the country illegally. Others had overstayed visa waivers, which typically allow stays of up to 90 days for tourism or business, not employment. And a few had expired visas. The scene was anything but routine. Footage captured by CNN showed masked agents ordering construction workers in hard hats and safety vests to line up as they processed the site. In a surreal twist, some detainees fled into a sewage pond on the property, prompting agents to deploy boats to retrieve them. One individual even swam under a boat in a desperate attempt to escape, though they were eventually apprehended. Schrank emphasized that this wasn't a random sweep, but the result of a months-long investigation involving interviews, document reviews, and judicial warrants. Hyundai, which insists none of the arrested individuals were direct employees, pledged full compliance with U.S. laws. A company's statement vowed to investigate its contractors and subcontractors, stating, "Hyundai has zero tolerance for those who don't follow the law." The plant, a 2,900-acre facility shared with LG for battery production, had its construction work halted temporarily. LG, which did not immediately comment on how many of its workers were detained, issued a vague statement about monitoring the situation and prioritizing employee safety. But the fallout extends beyond corporate statements. For the workers, the raid was a traumatic experience. One construction worker described the agents' arrival as a war zone, with employees rounded up in groups and processed for hours. Another hid in an air duct, enduring sweltering heat to avoid capture. Everyone came running and shouting that immigration had arrived, he said. Meanwhile, Hyundai's CEO Brian Kemp, who has long touted the plant as a 8,500-job economic boon for Georgia, faced scrutiny as his office defended the operation, calling it a necessary enforcement of state and federal laws. The controversy deepened when South Korea's foreign ministry expressed concern over the detention of its citizens, urging the U.S. to respect the rights of its nationals. Immigration attorney Charles Kuck added another layer. Two of his clients, South Korean engineers, had arrived legally under visa waivers but were detained anyway. They were here to advise briefly on work, he said, highlighting the gray areas between legal travel and employment. Meanwhile, a parallel raid in New York's Cato Village added to the national conversation. At a family-owned nutrition bar factory, over 70 workers were questioned and arrested in a similarly aggressive operation. Employees described agents as aggressive and theatrical, with police dogs and ATVs creating a scene more reminiscent of a drug bust than a workplace investigation. New York Governor Kathy Hochul condemned the raids as overkill, arguing they harm families and do little to enhance public safety. So what's the bigger picture? While federal agents insist these raids target economic migrants rather than violent criminals, critics argue the tactics, like mass detentions and public humiliation, risk alienating immigrant communities and undermining trust in law enforcement. And here's the part that sparks debate. Should corporations like Hyundai be held accountable for subcontractor compliance? Or is this purely a matter of federal enforcement? As the dust settles, the raids have exposed a tangled web of legal, ethical, and economic issues. For the workers, the question is whether they'll be allowed to return to their lives. For the companies, it's about how to navigate global supply chains without becoming complicit in legal gray areas. And for the public, it's about whether these operations truly serve justice or merely amplify fear. What do you think? Should corporations face stricter accountability for subcontractor compliance? Or is this primarily a legal enforcement issue? Share your thoughts below.